Hi everyone, thank you for joining me today. There was a hiccup with recording of this session, and Dr. Bezetta asked me to re-record the first part of it. So when you see me do a quick shirt change, you know that you're on the original recording. So with that in mind, let's restart this. So one of my biggest challenges as a human being is being cynical. I wanted to talk about this because as academics, we are really trained to be cynical, to question evidence, challenge positions, and engage divergent viewpoints. And so that's what we do, right? But if you're like me, sometimes it carries over into aspects of sort of your life that might benefit from a more nuanced form of engagement. So my point here is simple. This presentation is helping me work through an aspect of myself that I want to be better at. If you can find some aspect of it so useful as well, let's drill down and let's do our thing. So, which of these statements sounds most like you? Or have you heard from colleagues? I can say I've probably said at least, well, maybe all of these at some point in my career. Each one of these derives from one of our four dispositions. So let's take a look at these dispositions. So let's start with credulity, which is blanket acceptance of a claim or like position without engaging it critically or in any meaningful way. Of course, so the concerns from this position are issues with not addressing potential problems or blindly accepting a path forward. In this disposition, we are prone to mistakes and being played by a person or group, which is never a good thing. Well, I'm not going to be too political or political at all. You might know where my thinking is going. This blind allegiance is housed in a credulity mindset. So let's move down to cynicism, which again, I've noted some of my thinking lands and where I want to really improve. So being a cynic assumes that something is a negative. So other aspects of cynicism so include rejecting possibilities and as well as potentials, which then leads to mistrust and not being open to other perspectives. Sometimes past events have made us become more cynical, which is what happened in my case. Being in a toxic environment or one where you didn't feel welcomed or part of the team, that sort of thing, can cause one to become more cautious of others' motives. Why did they say it that way? Why did they do this in some specific way instead of just doing it this way, which might have made more sense? Yeah, of course, this breaks down to possibly overthinking, or what one we might call useless so thinking. Not always thinking isn't always useless. Sometimes it's very useful, but in this case, I think it can be not very helpful, and this can be unproductive in a team environment. So for me, I work with so I work with the best colleagues I ever have. So it's important for me to better manage this aspect of my thinking, so I can be open and welcome their ideas and on suggestions, because they do have great ideas and allows us to move forward as a team. So moving on, much of my work has been shifting to a skeptical mindset, but also a pragmatic one, which I'll discuss in just a moment. The skeptical mindset looks for evidence to support claims before accepting them. So evidence for us as academics is the secret sauce that we all look for, but sometimes it can cause us to be in decisive, and that can paralyze us as we continue to evaluate the evidence. So, in other words, getting bogged down with the options, or maybe overthinking them, that becomes part of the issue. This is me with fast food restaurants and like their menus. You have the descriptions, you have the items up on the board, and they don't give all the information I'm looking for. Like, does it come with this topping or that topping? For me personally, pickles don't belong on burgers. but I never know if it's on the burger or not. So I become kind of anxious in a fast food restaurant. So I pick something I know I might not want, that I know is not going to have the sort of the things that I don't want because I don't know what it comes with. So that for me is a moment of freezing where I just, you know what, I'll just have water. So ideally, we want to move into a pragmatic mindset that helps us focus on solutions and problems, and not problems. So issues or just the maybes. Being pragmatic encourages us to find the solutions based on what we know now, but also allows us to adapt later on. This is the more forward-thinking um, way of shepherding that, so that then allows us to be more mindful of things like the traditions, because those might come into part of the issue. So we have to find ways to incorporate them, but then not negate them. So let's do a deeper dive on cynicism. So being a cynic, of course, as we know, a cynic is where we want to get away from, and that is sometimes where I sometimes fall, oh yes, forward down. I assume that something's bad is going to happen. I don't want to think like that. I want to think what's possible. Where can we go from here? Those are that's where I want to be, and that's what I'm working towards towards doing. But being a cynic also shuts things down when you say this is not going to work. It shuts down the discussion, and we have some examples here. I doubt this committee is going to listen to any feedback, so it shuts things down. And being a cynic shuts things down, and having that mindset doesn't move us forward. And we always want to be trying to work forwards to finding a way to solve some of the issues so that we have. Okay. Credulity is just accepting whatever it is. Yes, 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 it's going to be great. It's going to be wonderful. Well, that's not critical enough. So we have to be critical when the way we make decisions and the research so that we do, and the risk of this is we aren't making good like decisions for our department or for ourselves or for whatever. So just accepting doesn't get the job done. Skepticism. This is asking for the support. Where's the research? So it encourages discussion. It encourages more questions. So we're getting more to the pragmatic side, finding ways to support what we think we know. What does the research say? How has this been done in the past? So asking those types of questions allows us to really start to move forward. Being pragmatic. So being pragmatic is the action steps of things. So what's going to work in practice? How is that going to function for us as we move forward? So testing the solution. So testing the outcomes. How might those work? So going back at the research and saying, did this work the way we thought it would work? So some examples of that. Can we pilot this and see how it works before we adopt it across the whole campus? So these are ways to think about doing small things to have larger effects. So some examples of these is for cynical. They say they want our input, but they already have made up their minds. So that is just assuming this is the way it's going to be, and we want to work away from that. Being skeptical. Is there real evidence that this policy helps students or helps means whatever? So you're asking questions, you're getting to the next level. I'm going to go to 4 now because that's the next one I like to address. So again, just assuming things are just going to be great. Let's just go with it. We have an idea. We haven't done any testing. We just assume it's just going to be great and just going to go with it. Working towards being pragmatic. Let's give this a try. Small tests, see how things are going to work. So your department is adopting a new policy. So faculty might say, admin will ruin it as usual. So Yeah. So what kind of disposition do we think that is? This would be the interactive part, girl.
Well, if I had to assume, Dr. Myers, I would say it was the cynic.
Yeah, for sure. Next one, sure. Let's just make it happen. Let's just put it into place. So what do we think that one is?
Is it possible to just go back to that first slide, Dr. Myers, so we can,
Sure.
by definition, really quickly? I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
I'm gonna just get a screenshot of that. Thank you.
Of course. Sure, let's do it. Let's just do it immediately.
And if you're not in any position uh to join us via audio, feel free to respond in the chat.
That one would be credulity. Yes, Miss Miller is right on the money. What evidence do we have that this will help students? Go back, look at the options we have here. Cynical, skeptical, pragmatic, or credulous. Skeptical for sure. And can we pilot it to see how it works? This one is, so the last one that's left, it's pragmatic, of course, because it is is doing a test to see how it works for, for the larger aspects. So kind of the point of this presentation is thinking through how do we approach when we have something new in our department, when we have a new policy or we have something new that happens, how do we approach it? So for me, I'm working towards away from the cynical and even the skeptic to becoming more pragmatic. I know the title of this presentation is becoming skeptical because for me to be skeptical gets me too pragmatic. So I'm working through this process little by little, day by day. So day by day. That's part of the process that I'm seeing. So as it's operating. So focus points for us, self-awareness of cynical thinking. So for me, that self-awareness becomes very critical because once I'm aware of it, then I can address it in my own mind. So avoiding blanket acceptance of whatever it is. So just accepting something and say, yeah, let's do it. Well, that's not being critical enough, right? We have to be a little critical to see how it might work long term, short term, and all the downstream effects that it might give us. Explore evidence-based options. So doing some research, how has it been done so as someplace else? So was it effective there? How effective was yes was it there? Can we tweak it up a little bit for our needs? So engage in useful directions. So once we've done some of that research, how adapting it might make us how might that program or that policy or whatever it is be useful for us, and how can we continue to evolve it so as we're moving forward. The four dispositions engaging with students. So for me, I'm thinking so as a faculty member, how can I approach students seeking specifically perhaps of AI, of how they're engaging with AI. The AI is one of those things we've been talking a lot about here on campus. So thinking about how students are sort of engaging with AI, how they're utilizing this AI, and not making assumptions about how they're using AI. The cynic would say, "Oh, so the AI detector on turn it in says it says your essay, so your paper is 75% so AI." Well, that might not be accurate because we know that AI detectors are okay to a degree, but they also make some mistakes. They make some assumptions. We also know that when a student uses a grammar program like Grammarly, it will provide some coding that the AI detector detects, and it reads it as being AI when it's not truly generated solely by a AI. So having an engagement with like the students becomes useful and avoiding that cynic mindset. So it's not immediately judging without knowing the background of how it got to be there. So likewise, it's just not accepting them without asking questions. So just because an AI detector does not read it or catch it or perceive it as AI doesn't mean it's not AI. So asking questions of students, like for example, gives us some insight into how they created that paper. I think last semester I talked about the ideas of product and process, how getting away from the product that students produce and talking about their process, how they created their paper, what was their thinking process, what was their brainstorming process like. All those things come into play as we're working through these the different dispositions that we're talking about here. Being a skeptic, so working towards that mindset allows us to be curious. So asking for is support. So you probably know on Google Docs there's a version history that we can look at. And I'm encouraging students to use Google Docs when they write their papers, because that way, so I can say, well, show me your version history so I can see how you work through this process. And that shows me that if I'm seeing a chunk of text was inserted like 3 pages of text in like 1 minute, well, then I'm pretty sure they didn't write that in 1 minute. So the evidence is showing me that it was done very quickly. Whereas if you look at a Google Doc that's made minute by minute, you see, a phrase or two is added, and next minute you see another phrase or two is added. So you can see the progression of the student's thought of how they revised, they went back and they added things and subtracted things and moved things out and moved things in. All those allow us to inquire with them and engage with them in more meaningful ways. And it helps them to recognize that we value like their input, being pragmatic. So if they are misusing AI or something else, it allows us to think about how can we move forward from where we are right now. So doing a study with students, yes, right now, there's a few studies going on campus about AI and how students are engaging with with AI. And then so using those studies to help us as a campus to kind of think through, okay, how do we want to engage students with the idea of AI? Do we want to give them more specific instructions, or do we want to limit its usage in some fashion, or give more direction, or whatever that is? But it's so working through some of the ideas and doing some studies to find out what's actually effective or not. Okay, the Socratic method. I love the Socratic method because it's questions upon questions. I love questions. I love asking questions of students and my colleagues because in asking questions, it gets us closer to where we want to be. So the Socratic method for me is always about finding insights into how they respond and then using those responses to ask more questions, because those questions get us further down and going closer to a new policy, to a new way of thinking, to whatever it is. So the Socratic method for me is one of my go-tos when I'm a teacher, and kind of in life as well. So what Socratic method is asking probing questions to explore topics And so the one being asked the questions arrives at their own conclusion. So it's kind of leading students down the pathway to the answer for the problem, the issue, I mean, the whatever. And that's useful for us as well, because when we ask questions, how do we want students to engage with, again, so staying with the example of AI, how do we want them to engage with AI? And then that response leads, so this will lead us, okay, well, what does it mean to engage with Gen AI to brainstorm? What might that look like? Well, it might look like X, Y, and Z. Okay, so using X, Y, and Z, how might they use that to then transfer to the next thing? When they have the brainstorming done, how does that transfer? How do they then create a document? How do they then start doing research? How do they then start writing their paper? So we can keep asking questions to keep building from there, and in doing that we start to find how things develop long term, and in that development we see critical thinking taking place, because it encourages students to really think about and synthesize all the things that they've been reading or encountering. So taking pieces of each of them and then creating meaning from all those things that they put together in their mind, like they're making connections between this subject and that subject and how they work together from their from their perspective. It's one of the great things that I like about teaching is providing students a perspective that they may not have. Likewise, with the Socratic method, they give me a perspective that I don't have. Because if you think of it like this, when students are in like the classroom, they all sit wherever they sit, right? And if you look at where you stand or you sit in the classroom, from each student's perspective, their line of sight is different. So they're seeing things from a different perspective. And that's one of the examples I use in class. So they see things from different perspectives, not just theirs. So sometimes what I ask students to do is just move around the room and take on a new perspective in that classroom so they can recognize, well, I never saw this side of Dr. Meyer's head. So this side looks different from this side. Of course, I'm being playful there, but the idea is that having that new perspective so allows them to see things from a new point of view, and that gives us insight in like the various things. Along with that, it allows us to avoid making assumptions, because when we make an assumption, we have assumed it, and we all know what assuming means, right? So being aware of that, so that awareness allows us to create a more balanced type of perspective. So as we move forward, so some key takeaways: balance is key. So I'm not saying don't be cynical, because there are times that it is useful, right? But balance, having balance of being cynical, but also pragmatic, leaning more towards being pragmatic, so minimizes the times that we're cynical. So having a balance of these four is probably the best. So building the culture. So long term, as we all think about this and getting away from a cynic mindset, if you're in that mindset, and you may or may not be, so working towards a more pragmatic one allows us all to keep improving and finding ways to make everything we encounter better. So to encourage to being a skeptic, so that encourages to ask questions, to be skeptical, to do more research, to find out how others are doing things, which then leads us to being more pragmatic, doing that work that gets us to be more pragmatic, doing those pilot studies, so we can see, okay, this is how it might work here. So we see how it worked there. How might it work here? Because we all know that JSU is a unique place. It has its own culture, so it has its own ways of doing things, which is different from any place else on like the entire planet, which is one of the great things about JSU. So in seeing how someone else does, it does it on their campus or their business, or I mean, whatever, and transferring it here, what might we need to do to make it more powerful and more meaningful for us? Okay, so the question becomes, so how do I do this? Because that for me was the thing that I was thinking about the most. How do I get to being more pragmatic? And I had to really sit down and consider, okay. And so I'm doing step one here, right? I have to interrupt my thinking. I've got to stop and question, why am I thinking this way? What support or what rationale do I have for thinking this way? The cynic doesn't often have rationale for the way they're thinking. So they don't have any evidence. It's just an impression. So getting away and saying, okay, hang on, I need to stop a minute. I need to think through this, not be cynical. I need to go, okay, what evidence do I have for for this feeling that that I'm having? And if there's nothing there, and there probably isn't, if you're being skeptical, I mean, if you're being a cynic, then you shift to replacing it with, what is the mechanism that's causing me to think this way? What is the thing that I can do on my end to do more research? What am I missing? How can I move forward? So with this, finding those little things to pick apart, doing the research, so finding more insight, asking questions, doing the Socratic method, and then step three is testing, and that gets us to being more pragmatic, to acting and proposing. How about we do a pilot study on this? How is that going to look? What are we going to learn from that? How can we use that to adapt to move forward? Those types of things, that's the three-step process I've kind of come up with. As I'm working through my own cynic mindset, I'm stopping. I'm saying, is this a rational thinking? No, it's not very rational right now. I have to question, why am I doing this? I need to get out of this mindset and work towards so replacing it with some research. So like some evidence. I need something to work with. I can't just make an assumption. And that leads me to asking, okay, what do I need? What do I need to find out? What can I do to improve this process? What can I do to help this person or help this policy? Or, I mean, how do I move forward? But how do I do this? I just read that a few times. I'm like, that sounds weird, but so it works. Okay, that is the presentation, and I want to thank you. And any questions, comments we have, let's get to those, because I know it's Friday, so I know we want to move along.
So before we get to the questions, I do want to share some comments that we have in the chat. Apparently, you struck a chord with several of our attendees in regards to some of their own teaching strategies and what they are using in their classes. And they are realizing now, oh, I am using this method. I just did not know what to call it. Referencing Dr. Bennett's comment in regards to that she does use it, and she appreciates that now she knows what she's doing and she has a name to associate it with it. And also we have Dr. Miller, who also spoke to how this will allow us to diversify how we work with our students, meeting their needs and not approaching them as a one size fit all, encouraging our students that are more introverted than others to be more engaging, to answer questions, to respond in questions. A lot of people don't like questions. However, they are needed and necessary, especially when you're trying to be pragmatic. And so I appreciate that. I wanted to share that before you open the floor to additional comments or questions or discussions.
And I know I ran through things pretty quick, but I think it's a process to work through. But I also know it's Friday, and I also know we like to speed things along on Fridays. So thoughts or comments, questions? Socratic method.
I do like those that are able to speak, if they could share with us how they have been more have experiences where they have been cynical, and may have used these strategies to help them through those. if anyone would share, that would be great.
When the method doesn't work. Well, exactly what method are you referring to, Dr. Alam? The spreading method. I keep asking questions because there's going to be a question that hits. So for me, it's always asking more questions, and it might be making those questions more closed questions than than open questions, and from the closed questions, then I can get to the open ones because I give them easier questions to answer, and then I get them going, and then I can get to the more complex questions that I might want them to lead to.
Thank you for that, Dr. Meyer. I'd like to thank you for your presentation. It was insightful, and I also appreciate the practical application because that's important, not just learning about these new methods, but how we actually implement them. I think sometimes it's easy to become a little cynical when you're kind of making some adjustments and you're thinking to yourself, are they going to watch these videos? Are they going to view these materials? And you find really sometimes you'll have that one student or those few students who say, I really found this helpful. And it kind of, so I think sometimes our students' responses to what we do, the questions we ask, the materials we provide, can move us away from that cynicism. Again, I appreciate you for the practical application you offered.
And I think you're right. I think feedback from students is always useful. So at the beginning of each semester, there's typically one or two students that they come up to me and said, I really like the way you're doing this because my questions so engage them. Hopefully, not always, of course. You might post a video and you're asking questions and doing those things that are really useful for them, but we don't always see students doing those things that can be useful for them. So it's encouraging them to do that. And the Socratic method is one way I think we can do that. So are the thoughts, comments, questions?
Hey, Dr. Meyer, this is Kanisha. I just wanted to echo Dr. Miller's comment and share that even with my undergrad students, what I am promoting critical thinking in my abilities to be able to promote critical thinking because they are so very heavy reliant on AI that I'm fearful that, that skill will be a lost art at some point. And so this was just a reminder and a refresher to the need for that questioning and those different strategies and methods. So thank you again for this presentation.
Well, thank you for that. I think one of the things that's really hard for us right now, at least for me, I can only speak for myself, but with the advent of AI and the usage of AI and how many students are using AI for that shortcut because it's easy, right? And I can't fault them for taking advantage of something that's easy for them to use. I can't fault them for that. I don't know what I would have done if I had AI when I was their age. So I was in college. I'm sure there's no doubt in my mind I probably would have used it. But then and then someone would have talked to me and said, hey, so in doing this, these are things that you're losing. You are not developing your solely critical thinking. You are not developing your voice. You are not not developing your writer's voice. You aren't including your little snippets of what makes you you in your writing. One thing I'm told quite a bit with my writing is people know it's me when I'm writing because I have these little quirks in my writing. I have bad jokes that three people will get on the entire planet, and then I have little phrases that I might use or little things that I do that yeah, that's Craig. He's a little different because he does these because I do those little things that make me just a little bit different that AI can't do. At some point it might be able to, but for me, the thing I'm trying to encourage students to think about is so many of our voices have been stripped away. So it's really important for them to recognize what Gen AI is doing is taking away their voice and not having their voice in the chorus is really a loss for like all of us, right? So having their voice in that course is absolutely critical.
Agreed. Thank you.
Hey, Dr. Meyer, this is Shirley Williams. I appreciate everything that you said. I was listening to the skepticism, and I'm thinking that I'm using it when I ask students to provide evidence to support their claim in a writing piece. I'm not sure if that's the same skepticism, but I'm trying to relate it to what I do in the classroom. And when I'm asking them to clarify a claim or a point text to support it, I'm thinking that I'm asking for evidence. I'm asking for more inquiry. So would that be the same as the skepticism that you're talking about here as it relates to the students?
Yeah, I think so because it's asking them to support to what they're saying. So,
Right.
so an example might be, well, okay, I mean, you said this about the text. So where does it say that so in the text? So let's go to that paragraph or that sentence or whatever, and let's break that down. And how does that relate to like the rest of the paragraph or the rest of the section or the chapter or the discussion so that we're having? So it's encouraging them to go back to whatever it is, find the support for what they're what they're saying, and then put on their own spin. So what does it mean for them? So engaging the critical thinking, but also like the reflection of that, like what that means for them. So based on their like perspective.
Yes, thank you. Like a credible source, you have to
Mhm.
do a little bit of evidence seeking and inquire. Well, I do that, but I didn't know what you call it. So it's good for me to be aware of a more technical term so I can start using that and tell them you're going to be using skepticism. Thank
Mhm.
you.
Mhm. Of course. Any thoughts or comments, questions?
Well, I do not see any additional comments or questions in the chat. And so, with that, I will move forward with just thanking you all for participating. You can find all of our presentations on the link that I shared in the chat. And we want to thank Dr. Myers also for such a wonderful presentation and timely, especially as we're transitioning and we see more transitioning to AI usage. We want to be more, we might be cynical, but we want to also, not take away the student's voice and their credibility. We do want to be skeptical, of course, and ask questions and ask for that evidence. And we want to be pragmatic. And so I do appreciate because I also learned a lot that I'm doing is what you shared, and I did not know, nor did I know it was some additional steps that I needed to include it and revisit. Before we do dismiss for today, I do want to share that Dr. Mayers, I'm sorry, was also a bit cynical before we started. Or he started his presentation because he was asking himself questions. Well, are they really going to need this? Are they really going to use this? And I was like, yeah. And so I think he's pleasantly pleased that, of course, a lot of us can use this information. In fact, many, if not all of us can. And so we do appreciate you for sharing with us. I'm obviously not Dr. Pizzetta. She does a much better job at presenting and hosting these presentations or these sessions, but she cannot be here today. She will rejoin us for the next presentation. But with that, we thank you for your time. We appreciate your support, and we are hopeful that you have a great, great weekend.
Yes, it's true. Take care, everyone.